Hi, my name is Joanna Biggar, and I'm a writer, teacher, and traveler, and proud to be an author in the fine literary house of Squire Publishing. My second novel, Melanie's Song, came out a few months ago, and I'd like to talk to you a bit about that now from what we can call the outpost of this Squire Publishing reading room on the left coast. And it's important to share, I think, our ideas in reading and books at this particular time as we share this peculiar moment when we're all locked up separately around the world, yet thanks to the internet can share it together. As a writer and traveler, I find writing and traveling intrinsically linked. I've been wondering how to maneuver this strange place where we all find ourselves now in isolation, and I think I discovered a wonderful anecdote for that in rereading Keats's on first looking into Chapman's Homer. In particular, the first two lines really jumped out at me, and I want to share those with you as it put me in the state of mind as to how to kind of address this. Much have I traveled in the realms of gold, and many goodly states and kingdoms seen, he writes. Wow. Those realms of gold, of course, are the riches of Homer's Greece, but also books. Imagine those beautiful 19th century leather-bound volumes with gilded spines and covers. And those are the places, the objects, the possessions that take us, of course, to the goodly states and kingdoms. These are familiar places to readers, writers, and travelers, places we are all now beckoned to return to. And for me, this territory is home territory for my writing, because as I said, I'm a traveler as well as a reader and writer. As I said, I'd like to share a little of my new novel, Melanie's Song, with you, but since it's the second of a series, I think I need to talk briefly first about its predecessor, That Paris Year, which I have right here, and I will show you, give you a little show and tell here, because we need to see the beautiful work in the volumes of gorgeous covers, cut pages, inside flaps that is the work of Squire Publishing. And one of the reasons that we who are part of this wonderful team are very happy about it. In That Paris Year is the story of 5 young women from California who in the early 1960s go to Paris to study at the Sorbonne. And that book is based on my actual experience. Yes, I really did go to the Sorbonne and do this. And much of the book is drawn upon real experiences I had, or those of my friends. Of course, we went there because we had already ventured far into those realms of gold, the books, and the subsequent films, and the music, and all that create a magical space. And so it is into this space that the real people insert themselves, the real young women, when they go to Paris. So I'd like to read a short passage from that to give a flavor of that kind of landscape. Les Feuilles Mortes. An old song, the wind, the present. The plane trees shake, bow to the winds out of the west, a collection of yellowing leaves, curling in the last light of summer sun, swirls, then falls in a neat pile on the pavement near the curved Art Nouveau sign above the metro. Exit Boulevard Saint-Michel. A rush of footprints, high heels, and scuffed shoes, students' feet. It's easy to imagine Jocelyn among them as they hurry up the stairs and then down the street toward the Sorbonne, but none disturbs the leaves. There's a rise in the wind, and the sound of rustling, and leaves lift and sail away, perhaps to far corners of the city. Down a side street, already twisting into darkness, and the foreign, spicy aroma of open-air cooking, an unseen musician plays a flute. Across the square, the boulevard crosses Pont Saint-Michel, while along the quay traffic flows like the river, blurring into a long stream of colors. A vendor on the upper embankment begins pulling in his wares, Others soon follow. The wind is blowing the edges of their old maps and sidewalk watercolors, teasing the pages of books left open for display. Suddenly the air quivers as the heavy bells of Notre Dame. Too soon, it seems. Ring in the late afternoon. The September sun tries to linger on the ascending stone towers, the spires, the gargoyles. But mainly it is unsuccessful. It is a year filled with the unexpected 1962, and the wind hints at a cruel winter. Yet in the island in the middle of the river and its great cathedral appear unmoved. Ile de la Cité, shaped like a boat, rides in place, parting the dark waters of the Seine. The water flows calmly past, unperturbed, carrying with it the forgotten currents of history, the little flotsam of human lives, yellowing leaves. In the end, it remains a question. Does Paris become and remain a place of magic, or does it become a place of mystery, or something else altogether? Which depends entirely on how these individual lives of these young women can evolve in the world of such mythical preconceptions. Now, in Melanie's song, that premise is reversed. This novel takes place a dozen years later, with the same 5 young women, including one who's gone missing and is at the heart of it. The story plays out entirely in California, in 2 disparate locations, hundreds of miles apart. One, the North Coast, or Mendocino Coast, and the other in 2 distinct parts of Los Angeles, Hollywood to the left and Pasadena to the to the west and Pasadena to the east. These are landscapes well known to me. I'm a native Californian. And in this case, those familiar places are filled with entirely imaginary stories. I didn't do any of the things in these stories. In particular, the characters I knew didn't. And so those familiar characters now are put into a familiar landscape, but in an entirely fictional setting. So I'm going to read a sampling from those distinct parts of my state, or as many people view it, a country unto itself. So beginning in the beginning, with Melanie's song, we'll start with the narrator, who's both the narrator of the first volume and this one, and her name is JJ. And she has become a journalist. So we're going to hear first from her as she has discerned that her friend Melanie is missing, and she's gotten a hint at where she might have been up in this mysterious dark forested area of the Mendocino coast. Here we go. JJ drew in a deep breath, ready to give herself up to the sun. Sea breeze blowing through the open car window whipped strands of dark hair across her face. Below, the turnout along the rocky coast road, rocky cliffs disappeared into the tumult of white waves, and the ocean stretched endlessly into symphonies of blue. The gulls rode crests of air past islands of seaweed, searching for life beneath. Closing her eyes for a moment, she could still see the colors, the contours of the sea. The gulls cried out, and while the pounding and receding waves thrummed like her pulse, she said, calm down, she told herself, trying to let the beauty around her erase the fright that had just made her heart pound, willing the lingering smell of smoke and the remains of Highdale House to clear from her nostrils. She tasted the salt air even before it became a delicate crust on her skin, and she relaxed a little. The California coast was her native place, imprinted on her since before she could walk, and she felt that imprint even hundreds of miles north of her childhood beaches. No matter what she discovered about Melanie, she could cope. As her breath returned to normal, she pulled down the visor to stare at the sea and caught a glimpse of herself in the vanity mirror. Damn, she said aloud. Her dark moon eyes rested on smudged half-circles, like wayward moons, and her black brows seemed to point at the small crinkles that had crept into the corners, appearing overnight, like fault lines. This babe sure looks older than 32, she thought, wondering at the loss of the child she had been. Then she snapped the visor shut. Like the old questions started up again. What am I thinking, anyway? What am I doing here? Why am I doing this? Like the last decade and the nagging restlessness that had drove her still, to seek that maddening, elusive thing, a kind of truth. It was the same force that had sent her from poetry and its eternal questions to journalism and its fact-based resolutions. Answers, that's what she wanted, and now more than ever, for the last 2 years, the quest for stories of her oldest, truest friends, the ones she journeyed to Paris with a dozen years before, in 1962, they had kept her going. That was also when she realized she'd lost track of Melanie. Now, going over what had just happened, she was hell-bent to find her. How she'd learned from Ivan that Melanie had almost certainly been seen nearby, not long ago, at a small commune, high diddle house. How she'd left L.A. for a long weekend to see what she could find out. How she'd followed Ivan's hand-drawn map with an arrow pointing to the redwood forest. As her small Datsun headed up the coastal highway, as she glimpsed the shimmering, endless sea to the left, her spirits lifted. And finally, turning inland to follow a winding road along the tumbling little river, where the sunlight fell in strands of gold through the towering giant redwoods, she'd felt ready to succumb to magic. Then there was that first rough-hand painted sign saying, "Hi Diddle." And then the narrow twisting road, and the first jittery sense of foreboding had set in. The worry that she was treading a path where she ought not to go. Okay, so we'll leave Melanie there, and we'll skip to a later section in the book further on, and we'll get a glimpse of Pasadena on the other end of the state, and which is also Melanie's native place, and where many of the characters have ended up residing. This time, we're going to be looking at this through the point of view of Jocelyn, the young woman whom we saw already on the steps coming out of the metro in Paris. And she was JJ's roommate. They've been very, very close friends, and almost like sisters. So, like sisters, they also fight. And Jocelyn has become what everyone expected she would become, an amazingly successful and now very well acclaimed movie star. And she's gone to Pasadena, JJ's home territory, to do a movie shoot. For part of the time she's in the company of her director, whose name is Drew, and he's a very charming older gentleman originally from Poland, and he's at this moment also her lover. So we'll join her there. Signs for the Pasadena freeway loomed overhead, and her thoughts shifted from Drew to JJ, her oldest and best friend, who lived only blocks away from the Tournament of Roses headquarters, where the photo shoot was to take place. There would be plenty of time to drop by. They hadn't really been in contact for over a year, ever since JJ had written that awful piece, Superstar, a Virgin Still. Okay, JJ admitted to herself, I haven't exactly been in contact with her. I know she's put out feelers to me. Maybe it was time. She could just go down the street to Grant's big old loving house, JJ's house now, and check out the garden, say hello. Turning down El Molino, Jocelyn slowed into a side street, entering the neighborhood of turn-of-the-century houses, wrap-around porches, and old shade trees. It's all a set from another time, she thought, just like the one she was temporarily living in now, making her movie, which happened to be in the 1940s. Another place to escape to. As she pulled in front of Grand's and parked, a rush of memories rushed over her. The days during college when the fire had consumed both her house in Hollywood and JJ's in Mandeville Canyon, West L.A., and they had both found refuge with Gran. Gran's wisdom and kindness to her. The memory, that one and others, unlocked more. Life at the Maison Française, where she'd lived with her copine, JJ, before they all sailed off to Paris together. They were all so scattered now. I can do this. Knock on the door, say a quick hello, then leave. Do it before I lose my nerve. Jocelyn walked up to the driveway and went to the familiar covered porch with its huge old-fashioned pots, and pressed the doorbell. When the bell stopped chiming, she tried again. Maybe Gran was home, but hard of hearing. As Jocelyn looked around at the flowers, the clipped lawn, the porch swing, she took in the stillness, so different from the throb of Hollywood. Then it occurred to her, of course, JJ's at the paper now. Maybe Gran wasn't there at all. Nobody home. So we'll join Jocelyn again a few hours later after she's finished the photo shoot, and she and Drew are on their way to scout out another place that he's interested in for a place to shoot something. And so it gives a little different perspective of Pasadena and some other areas, parts of the area, which are very varied. When they took off down Colorado Boulevard again, Jocelyn fell silent. Her head filled with the images of what Drew had just shown her. The old Pasadena Playhouse shuddered, and she tried to imagine inside that mysterious building. Then she glanced up just in time to see the Star offices as they passed, but she didn't want to discuss what had been in her mind about JJ this morning. Then, when signs for Caltech appeared, she slowed slightly, imagining Gracie was somewhere inside, and almost tempted to turn in, but pushed on past. "So quiet, darling," Drew finally said. "A nickel for your thoughts." Jocelyn adjusted her big sunglasses and smiled, looking at him. "It's a penny, Drew. Just a penny. That's probably what all mine are worth." "Well, that could be managed by the budget, then." He grinned at her and placed his hand over hers on the wheel. "It's just that this town is so full of old friends, or memories of old friends, I haven't been in touch with for so long. I feel unsettled." "Ah, yes, darling, I know the feeling." He pulled a cigarette from his silver case in his jacket pocket. Why exactly did you want to go to scout in the mountains anyway?" Jocelyn asked. "Oh, I have heard about this Mount Baldy, which they tell me is often now with snow and groves of oranges growing below at the same time. It might just be perfect." Baldy. Jocelyn smiled to herself. Of course, Baldy. It was perfect. So we'll leave Jocelyn there and its vistas of Pasadena, and go on to think about the larger impact of what these landscapes mean and how they fit into the writing. In the end, landscapes invite people and buildings to fill them, and those people and buildings tend to reflect their surroundings. The North Coast, of course, is a land of rugged landscapes, forests, hippies, communes, bead and smoke-filled cafes, while the characters of a very different sort inhabit the key spots in the city. People of a clamoring newsroom, an eccentric house in the Hollywood Hills filled with memories and ghosts, movie sets, college campuses, and a turn-of-the-century house with gardens and inviting porches in a leafy and genteel Pasadena neighborhood that transforms itself while the characters around it are transforming themselves as well. These two novels of mine reflect the way the imagined and the real keep reinforcing themselves in my work, and probably in my life. But the endless permutations of that, aided by wandering in those wonderful and magical realms of gold, invite us all now, in this time of enclosure and reflection, to continue to read and to travel far in our minds. And there's no better place to turn to than Allen Squire Publishing, which is offering its beautiful and nourishing collection of books at giveaway prices online. Read poetry, essays, fiction, and compendiums of collected works from its Legacy series writers, those who have published widely in several genres, mostly in small and indie presses, and those who have contributed profoundly to the writing community in their own places. Their works also include plays, interviews, and travel pieces. In addition to Melanie's song, which I'll show you now, because again it's one of the beautiful Alan Squire titles with gorgeous covers and even kind of alluring back cover. Other recent publications include a new legacy work by Linda Watanabe McFerrin. I'll show you this one, Navigating the Divide, and she's a celebrated San Francisco Bay Area writer. Also, we have in the recent past come out with Reuben Jackson's wonderful new second collection of poetry, Scattered Clouds, New and Selected Poems. And of course, Jackson is a legendary DC poet and jazz master. And then finally, the most recent edition is another wonderful DC area poet, Elizabeth Hazen, with her haunting new volume of poems, Girls Like Us. All this and so much more for somewhere between 99 cents and $1.99. Wow. Check in with Alan Squire Publishing right now, and continue to fill up your bookshelves, your Kindles, and your mind with nourishing things to do while we're all on time out. It's been a pleasure to check in with you from the left coast, and I'll look forward to doing it again, and bye for now.